you are fairly active with your, new parenthood, and we see some of the posts you've made, and it honestly, it's very encouraging. Looks great. So, what are some of the things about parenthood that you're most excited about?
There is no side of it that I'm not excited about, to be honest. Like, you realize when you're growing up that parenthood has been, a lot of parents of our generation, parenthood was forced upon them pretty much. They didn't really get too much of a say in that decision, right? Like, there's just so much pressure that was put on all couples and all anybody who was getting married to have a child, and everybody. And while of course our parents have done as much as they can, and mothers in specific have really almost all of our mothers have really stepped up and been incredible as parents. I feel like nobody really, parenthood has not been done mindfully for the parents of our generation. It's never been done intentionally. It's never been done, as a decision rather
Mhm.
than, just as you know, uh, tick marks that need to be kind of, ticked off. But again, and
Right.
I say this all love and respect that, there was just, it's just one of the things that you're supposed to do in
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
Just as you're supposed to get married, just as you're supposed to go to work, just as you're supposed to, uh, you know, uh, do things, behave in a way that society expects you to behave. So, given that a lot of people of our generation are choosing not to have kids, I feel like every person in our generation, and when I say my generation, I mean millennials,
Hmm.
if deciding to have kids, I think it's very important that every one of us
Hmm.
is doing that with the decision actually is post you have a child, you're present for the child, you're intentional with their upbringing, you spend time with them, you're not doing it in
Hmm.
the middle of 20 other things that you're doing, and the child is as much as the center of your life as anything else that you're doing. So yeah, so if anyone asks you what part of parenthood are you excited about, then it's like literally every single part of it. There is not one part that I'm not excited about.
Lovely. And I mean, you've actually sort of answered my follow-up question, which was that conversely, what are some of the most challenging aspects? But you did mention some of the things about spending time, etc. Anything else you'd like to add in terms of the challenges?
So interestingly, challenges, I don't think for me, or again, I don't want to generalize for most millennial parents, but I would say
Hmm.
for me, the challenges are not internal. It's not about the child, right? The child
Hmm.
is the child. The child wants your attention. The child is going to cry. The child is going to poop. The child is going to pee. The child is going to need to be taken to the doctor. The child is going to
Hmm.
uh, need new clothes, need whatever. Anything the child needs is what the child needs, because that's what children are and do. And again, as I said, it's your decision, and it's not like it's an unexpected part. There is enough and more knowledge out in the world that what happens when you have a child, and how much is expected from a parent, in a regular situation. I think the challenge really is how are you coping with this as a part of a larger society, which may
Hmm.
not necessarily be centered on parenthood.
Hmm.
We kind of take it for granted that हाँ parenthood तो चलते फिरते हो ही जाता है, right? In a sense of like, if everybody has been doing it, how difficult can it be? Again, as I said, I don't think that it's difficult as a practice or as a role. It is more
Hmm.
difficult to practice the role as part of regular society, where you are expected to work from a certain amount of time to a certain amount of time,
Hmm.
where paternity leave, especially in fathers' cases,
Yeah.
most people only get 2 weeks and not more than that. Maternity leave is still a lot more, but at the same time, most organizations don't really are not conducive to parenthood, in terms
Hmm.
of the fact that, while of course some really large multinational companies today also have like play centers for kids, etc.,
Yeah.
etc., but none of the systems in societies are built keeping parenthood in mind, or are built with the idea that we are a society where there are going to be adults, and there are also going to be young people, and there are going to be children as well. And
Hmm.
and how do you enable parents to be parents full time while being, while doing their work full time and while leading their lives full time. So I don't think that there are enough, even in cities like Bombay right now, how many third
Hmm.
spaces are, how many spaces have we created for parents and children,
Correct.
to even rest or even just sit, like the beach is overcrowded. There are hardly any parks in Bombay. There is, with so much construction going on, there are hardly places to walk in the city. So
Hmm.
even when you want to take your child out somewhere, clean air is a problem. So all of these things are things that, I mean, of course, you feel when you are also when you don't have a child, but you feel it even more acutely when you have a child. So the
Of
challenge is
course.
societal, I would say, rather than, personal.
Fair enough. Good point. And as you were mentioning about, that there's enough and more advice around the world when it comes to resources, books, content, advisors, people, friends who have. So, are there any particular resources that you follow for, say, fatherhood tips, etc.?
So I believe in community, to be very honest. Like I feel
Right.
like the most important thing that you can have for your child is, I mean, we've heard the term, right? It takes a village to raise a child.
Of course.
Now, when we were growing up, a lot of us just had uncles and aunts and grandparents and so on
Hmm.
and so forth around, or
Absolutely.
if not around, at least accessible in many different ways. And even our parents' generation, in that sense, at
Hmm.
least to their credit, had friends who would also have babies around the same time, etc., etc. So you would then have, like, community activations a lot more. You would have picnics, or you would have dinners, and you would have, now of course, in all of these situations the mothers always had a lot more burden. So I also
Hmm.
want to acknowledge that. So it's not that it was a perfect system, but it
Hmm.
was, people were raised by a community, but while the community was mostly women, and men
Hmm.
would step up when they would, right? But
Yeah.
when you're living in urban spaces, it's so interesting, right? You could have a friends group of six people,
Hmm.
and they're all at very different stages of their life. There
Hmm.
is someone who has a teenage, son or daughter. There is someone who would, just would be married for very long without a child. Someone who's just gotten
Yeah.
married. Someone who never plans to get married. Someone who has a
Hmm.
baby. You would have, like, literally among the five or six closest people to you in an urban space, you could have people at very, very different trajectories of life.
Hmm.
And so in that respect, you may not necessarily have those spaces where, you may not have access to as much information
Hmm.
about parenthood, etc., etc. So
Right.
now, where it sometimes becomes also an advantage is that, you have, my child today, my baby today has an aunt and uncle who's also 23, who's also
Hmm.
26, who's also 29, who's also 35, who's also 40, who's also 50, who's also 55. So suddenly, there's a whole
Right.
spectrum of advice and a whole spectrum of love and generosity
Hmm.
available. But
Hmm.
particularly for me, and just I wanted to give context, but particularly for me, because I realized that you start observing things only when these happen to you, right? You have
Yeah.
a lot of these groups. There is tons and tons of mothers groups where mothers are there, where mothers are constantly talking and they're discussing things. Almost every
Hmm.
society has a mothers group, apart from a women's group, which every society has. Every society has a mothers group. Every workplace has a mothers group. Every, like, there's tons and tons. There are very
Absolutely.
few groups which are only men.
Hmm.
I would say, like, rarely groups. I won't even say very few. There will be rarely groups which are dads and only
Hmm.
dads.
Hmm.
Sometimes dads join the mothers group, but you would not see, like, a dad's group in itself. You would not see parent groups where dads are very active, etc., etc.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so what I did for myself, there are
Hmm.
two things that I did. A, I wanted really to involve the dads that I know, that I've known for a while, who may have looked up to, or who are just dear friends.
Hmm.
And I threw myself a dad baby shower
Oh,
because
that's amazing.
yes, because you have mom baby showers, and we threw one for my wife, and a lot of her friends came. It was wholesome and beautiful and lovely, and I just wondered, like, why don't I have this? Like, why don't men have this version, right? Like, I also want to
Hmm.
celebrate the birth of my child, but there is no concept of a dad baby shower, which is just
That's an
you know,
amazing
like,
concept.
So yeah, so I called a bunch of people. I did a dad baby shower. I called a bunch of dads that I knew, about 15 to 16 dads, or I think 15 to 18 dads were all there, all media and
Wow.
folks, and it was a very wholesome evening with just everyone exchanging stories, giving me advice. We played a few games. It was really, really sweet to see. And then post that, because everybody was also really like excited about how this happened, and nobody had done something like this, and they
Hmm.
just like a part of it. I've also started a WhatsApp group which is called Dad Support Group.
Oh, wow.
Where so we have got like now 20-25 dads on that, and media dads basically primarily, and
Right.
where we kind of keep checking, asking each other, and mostly again, the thing about dads, it's mostly like I also hoped that the group would have some emotional and wholesome conversation, but
Hmm.
you is whenever there is something wholesome or emotional said, it's like two people who have something nice to say, and the rest are always busy. But when you have a logistical question, like
Hmm.
20 dads, hey, I have an idea or whatever. So again, it's become a lot more logistics and having those conversations,
Hmm.
uh, and versus anything else. But at least there is a step that we have a group.
That's a great start. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you've cracked a very difficult segment, honestly. And I mean, these are great steps towards, how to evolve a modern father's role, and excellent points you've made.
I don't know if I'm forcing community, but I'm at least, I would like to think I'm building community, and sometimes it does feel with all the other dads that I'm just like pushing everybody. Ki you
I
have to
mean,
be part of a community. Having
they're
said that,
participating. That's great.
yeah,
We know today that how our childhoods and our relationship with our parents have, shape us as who we are as adults, as people. So that awareness of your childhood, of your
sure,
relationships
sure,
with
sure.
your father. So that, how much has that shaped your role as a father? Like, so what aspects of fatherhood have you inculcated from your own relationship with your father? And how has that shaped your role essentially?
I have a lot more appreciation for what my father has been, and what he has stood for, and the kind of person he has been to me. Even if, especially now, and not just the fact that he is right now, in a critical condition, and I am very aware of, I'm more aware than ever before how much he means to me in my life,
Mhm.
um, and how I need to have told this to him many more times before, and I hope that he recovers soon so I get to tell this to him more. Uh, at the same time, I feel like, for a very long time, I kind of carried, and I think a lot of, as boys and as sons of fathers, I think a lot of us boys carry a lot of angst against our fathers, especially
Mhm.
of a certain generation, and this is true. Again, I'm generalizing, but I've spoken to so many people at this point of time. Every kind of son has a thorny relationship with his dad, because, again,
Mhm.
as I said before, fatherhood is thrust upon a lot of father was thrust upon a lot of fathers of their generation, where they didn't know really what to do with it, right? Earlier, I feel like, I viewed this with empathy only for my situation, which
Mhm.
is the fact that, as a son, I did not get enough time with him. I did not get enough attention, or, enough emotional expression
Mhm.
uh, from my father. I just now, being a father myself and seeing, again, as I said, societal systems around us, I've
Mhm.
now started viewing his POV with a lot more empathy. So,
Mhm.
as an example, like, I know how much it has been a privilege for me to have been able to be on paternity leave. So I run my own
Mhm.
company, and I took the decision to kind of be at home with my child.
Mhm.
We give 3 months maternity leave to the women in our office, and I said that, and we've had one pregnancy before, and we had given her that leave. And then when it came to me, I said I also want the same leave, because we are a gender equal space,
Mhm.
and I would want any of the men in our office who also access to that. So that privilege of me being with my child, I know what it means to have, spend the early days doing the things, being a hands-on parent, which, earlier I used to think that, okay, why are fathers not hands-on? And now you start thinking, when if the government and the systems or the workspaces
Mhm.
want father back to office, in 7 days of them having a child. You're not even encouraging an emotional bond. You are
Mhm.
actually, there are two things that you're doing. A, you're saying that the role of a father does not have enough value,
Mhm.
uh, because you're saying that as a society, fathers, it's okay for fathers to immediately get back to work, because what will fathers even do with the child? Which is just a ridiculous thing, because me having gotten this initial time with my child is the reason why I have such a strong bond with her already.
Mhm.
And B, you are also putting more onus on the mother by saying that, listen, not only have you spent 9 months in carrying the baby,
Mhm.
and now during your recovery your husband will not be around and you have to take care of the child, because okay, obviously that is your role. So you are doing a disservice to both parents. You are putting burdens and onuses on the mother to not only have spent 9 months carrying the baby, but now also spending the recovery period of a very difficult hospital experience, where you have to literally having a child from your body, and not giving enough time for the recovery, but really just saying, now okay, now you've recovered, so what? Now you deal with the baby, now you raise the baby, while
Mhm.
you're and then the other hand, you're telling the father that you don't even need that time with your child, because what will you do? Work is more important. So I now have a lot more empathy for fathers of any generation, because I also
Mhm.
feel like they have not even been given a chance to have paternal instinct, like the maternal
Mhm.
instinct that we keep talking about, and how it's a natural part of nurturing, is a natural part of motherhood. Would say that nurturing is very normal even as a father. We don't place value on a father's nurturing, and that's why we actually, as a society, distance fathers from nurturing, because we
Mhm.
almost want distance between fathers and children, so that fathers can continue being a cog in the machine of capitalist society. Sorry, I'm going to rant here,
That's
but
fine.
and saying that, अच्छा तुम्हारा काम तो प्रोवाइडर ही है, तुम प्रोवाइड करो, मदर को नर्चर करने दो, तुम्हें क्या करना नर्चर करके. एंड द थिंग, एंड दिस इज द लास्ट थिंग दैट आई से, समर्पण, दैट
Mhm.
what I realized is that when you nurture a child, you also get nurtured. This is the
Mhm.
thing nobody tells you. This is the thing that you never know, or you don't understand until you become a parent yourself.
Mhm.
So when I hold my child in my arms, I am also getting nurtured. It's not that I am nurturing her. When I feed my child, when I, change my child's diapers, also when I play with
Mhm.
my child, it's not that it's good for her development. It's also good for me, because it makes me more of an emotional person. It makes me a kinder, gentler, more empathetic person, because I'm building a relationship with another human being at birth. It's such a beautiful, beautiful experience, and I do
Mhm.
get nourished and nurtured myself. And we have not allowed fathers to get nurtured. If it was, it's not a very simple question, ki what have you picked and what you haven't picked, because we have to view through the lens of the fact that fathers in our society aren't really given a chance at
Of course.
forming emotional bonds and nurturing bonds with their children. So
Mhm.
any emotions we have towards fathers is not fair emotion, beyond a point of time.
Mhm.
uh, they're valid in many ways, that yes, this is an experience, lived experience, that any of us may have had with our fathers. On the
Mhm.
other hand, like, do we really understand what our fathers have gone through themselves?
Mhm.
And it's not that if you did not get enough time with them, you they also didn't get enough time with you, which is a very important thing. That your
Mhm.
parents also, I mean, I would imagine my father would have wanted more time with me.
Mhm.
He just didn't get it because his job was to earn money. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but what I would always value from my dad in particular is just the fact that he showed up anytime I needed him for
Mhm.
anything. He
Mhm.
was there. Whether he knew what to do with that, I don't know. Whether he had the emotional capacity to deal with all of that, I don't know. But he
Mhm.
would be present, and I think that's a very big thing for fathers, that they come, they show up. They may not necessarily know. And again, I said my empathy is towards the fact that they were just never taught, or they just never had the opportunity to learn any of these, but
Mhm.
they would constantly show up. They would constantly be around. They would constantly do whatever it takes to make sure a child has a good education, has good food on the table, has the best possible path to being a successful human, even if
Mhm.
they could not nurture personally themselves. And I don't hold that against them. So I
Mhm.
just want to do the same with my child. I want to be present. I want to be mindful. I, of course, want to fight for time. in any way possible to
Mhm.
ensure that I'm nurturing my child, and I don't miss on that part of my life, and she doesn't miss on that part of her life.
That's a very interesting thing that you said about, how when you're nurturing your child, you yourself are getting nurtured, which essentially, so of course, there are changes in you happening, right? And like you said, until it happens to you, you don't really know. So for you, like you mentioned, when you had the baby,
Mm.
what kind of changes have you seen, like primarily in yourself since you've become a dad?
I mean, it's only been 2 months, but then I think it's very
Hmm.
interesting. You start, I've started very weird thing to say, but I've started valuing my life a lot more than I did earlier, in a sense
Hmm.
that I recognize that if I'm in a good health, I will be able
Hmm.
to take care of my baby better. If I am
Hmm.
in a good emotional space, I'll be able to take care of my baby better. If I am safe, I'll be able to be around for my baby. If I
Hmm.
am mindful, so it's very interesting. Like I'm trying to cut down my screen time myself.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm trying to, be more regular with my walks, with be eat healthier. All of that, just kind of has become very important to me all of a sudden. Where earlier it was like part of my larger things that I need to do in life. Yes, I need to, in general, be like a healthier person,
Hmm.
uh, mental health wise, physical fitness wise. In
Hmm.
general, you need your screen time, but now it just becomes like it's very significant that if you don't
Hmm.
do it, uh, you will not be able to kind of completely be a good father to your child because you'll not have the capacity in that
Hmm.
sense. But second of all, as they say, the children don't do as you say, they do as you do. If I'm going to be an example to her in terms of the way that I'm eating or sleeping or my screen time or etc etc, it'll
Hmm.
help her as well. So it's made me be more kinder to myself. It's made me be more gentler to myself. It's made me be more nurturing to myself. So nurturing to my child has actually helped me in many ways recognize the need to nurture myself as well.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, Firstly as her father, but now I think I want to kind of do it because for me also, which is never been my in my personal capacity. That's always been a problem. I'm always more nurturing to others than to myself, but because of having a baby, I think I'm going to want to be more nurturing to myself as well,
Wow,
even if it
that's
starts as being something that I do for her.
that's lovely. So your relationship with yourself has, in a sense, changed a fair bit.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah,
that's
already.
fantastic. Of course, the one of the things we were talking about right at the beginning about how societal changes are required. There are so many issues, right? In terms of spaces in cities, air quality, everything, and of course, we're going through a crazy transformative time everywhere. So, off the top of your head, what are some of the issues that you hope will get sorted and figured out by the time your child is an adult?
This is the anxiety that has really started building for me, like in terms of just good air, yeah. You want your child to be able to have breathable air. We don't have that. We don't have mechanism for that. We don't have enough conversation around that. There are a lot of people on the internet who shit on children who are hugging trees and who are talking about the environment and saying,
Mhm.
it's almost looked down upon as, oh, it's impractical. No, it's not. The moment you
Mhm.
become a parent, you realize that how important it is to have good oxygen in your city, how important it is to have green spaces. Where are
Mhm.
the children sitting? They can't sit, we just enabling a society and cities that only have concrete everywhere.
Absolutely.
We don't even get our children to sit down. Where can they, roll around, play in the mud, as they say? Every society has like this little, play area where, and it's just such a small area. It's like smaller than the size of a Bombay apartment. So within that area, you have like 20 kids who are trying to play there, etc., etc. And otherwise, they're playing around your society, whatever, but they should have more spaces to be free. They should have spaces to fall. They should have spaces to fall without getting injured. They should have
Mhm.
space to pick themselves back up. They should have spaces where they can meet other children, where they can have human interaction,
Mhm.
which goes beyond what we are teaching them as parents. They should have a certain amount of freedom
Mhm.
to to grow as children. So,
Absolutely.
and I am one of those parents who is very like against children kind of having devices too early, and or for that matter, even being online. Like I've shielded her face. I've not put her face on the internet. I'm not very
Mhm,
comfortable with that. I want
mhm.
my child to have an analog childhood as much as possible. We know that AI is going to take over the entire world. Fine, she will learn it anyway.
Yeah.
I can't stop her from learning that. But what I can do is that I can, until that happens, until she picks up, like we can't not give her a device
Mhm,
for whatever reason, and until she picks up and starts learning all the technological tools that would require her to succeed in the world we live in today. can
mhm,
i we need as parents and as a society to do whatever we can to enable child friendly environments. And again, as I said, public spaces, third spaces, and green spaces more than
mhm,
anything else. I
mhm.
think that is what's required.
Lovely. One for the crowds. You've worked in Bollywood, you've created stories for Yash Raj. From drawing from that experience, who is let's say, a screen father that you think has been shown well, has been portrayed well as an example of a good father-child relationship?
I feel like fathers in our Bollywood films have always been portrayed as patriarchal or angry, etc. And that is very much a portrayal of what society has been, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
so gentleness in fathers is not something that has really been given much value,
Hmm,
or
hmm.
kindness, or empathy, or just like son relationships, father daughter relationships for that matter.
Hmm.
It's so interesting. Like right now, I'm thinking of DDLJ. In fact, where Anupam Kher's character is a
Right.
dad who very pro son. He's like,
Hmm,
I'm here for you, buddy. You do what you want, and
hmm.
have your back. He was an excited father. He was willing literally to scam his way into a family because his son needed support.
Yeah.
He was okay to get beaten up if
Hmm.
that his son or if his child really like if it would help his child get the love of his life. I think that's a beautiful relationship. That's something that I really remember. Now really randomly, I'm just it's coming to my mind, like I really saw a very nice sequence in Pankaj Tripathi with Janvi and him, where she plays a flight a pilot in the Dharma film that came
Uh-huh,
recently.
uh-huh.
And I remember Pankaj Tripathi playing a dad who was very gentle with his child, who was basically just kind of again said the same thing that
Hmm,
I have your back, and whatever you need to do, you need to do. I think Hindi medium where Irfan's character,
hmm.
is a doting father who kind of does whatever needed to get
Yeah.
his good education.
Hmm,
So I would say any kind of father relationships. I mean, all the father relationships that I can think of, where
hmm.
fathers were kind of gentle, is the thing that really stands out to me. And I think we need to have more of that. We need more kind relationships. Farooq Sheikh and even Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, just being sweet to his son. When
Hmm.
he's trying to live out his dream. So those relationships, I think we should just encourage more, show more, and be aware of more. Not that we have to paint a world in rose tinted glasses. It's not that we must showcase sometimes reality as well. So it's not that
Hmm.
that's not reality. It's not that you don't have dads who don't understand their children.
Yeah.
Most of our dads are, most of the dads in our society are like that.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
it's unfortunate. And every one of those, like
Hmm.
Udan is a monumental film in the way that it showcased a father-son relationship.
Yeah.
So while those films and those stories are important, I
Hmm.
also feel, and I'll give you a very good example, like Schitt's Creek. It really stands out to me as um, this beautiful aberration of a relationship between the father and his children, and in the way that they depicted themes of queer love, right? And I
Hmm.
remember that there's a documentary where they did after the show got over, called just what is a really funny name, which was
Right.
the sign. It's called Best Wishes, Warmest Regards. And in that
Right.
documentary, so a bunch
Hmm.
of LGBTQ moms. actually speak to Dan Levy and ask him, like, we've mostly seen shows where where homophobia is depicted very strongly, and
Mhm.
you don't really see these kind of gentle relationships between father and children,
Mhm.
where sexuality of the child isn't even questioned. And they said, why, what made you do this? And Dan Levy said this wonderful thing. He said that,
Mhm.
I don't want to, I think there's already so much unkindness in society. I want to
Mhm.
show a world that I want to live in. I want to
Mhm.
write the world that I want to live in. And that is why I have depicted these relationships in this way. And that's why the father doesn't even, there is not even a conversation about his child's sexuality across the series. There is not a
Mhm.
single conversation, and it's such a beautiful thing that where it's just normal. A child having any sexuality is normal. A
Mhm.
child just and the father is just a doting dad anyway. He's a kind, sweet, loving father. So for me, Eugene Levy's character in Schitt's Creek is just such a great example of what a dad can and should be, where sometimes not actually saying, um, not bringing up something is actually something which is way kinder than bringing about having conversation.
I've reached the end of my questions. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for doing this piece. It's so important to have pieces where we talk about fathers, again, as I said, with gentleness.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.